Welcome to the fourth panel of our today's program, our fourth and last panel, and welcome to those who are joining us on the webcast. The panel is on professional ethics and dissent. Our major paper will be given by Colonel Retired Don Snider. Our commentators will be Lieutenant General Gregory Newbold and Peter Hegseth. For the benefit, everybody in the audience knows you have the bios in your paper, so I'm not going to go over them in detail, but just briefly for our webcast audience, Don Snider is now at the Strategic Studies Institute at the Army War College after a distinguished career at West Point. He had a very distinguished career in the active Army, serving in Vietnam on numerous tours, and ultimately concluding his active duty career serving on the staff of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's written prolifically, and his studies now focus on civil-military relations, the identities and development of the American officer, and the military profession. Peter Hegseth is probably the junior member of our faculty to join us today, having been commissioned from Princeton in 2003. He served with distinction in Baghdad in numerous capacities, and he presently also serves as the Executive Director of Vets for Freedom, an organization dedicated to mobilizing veterans to explain the American strategy in Iraq. General Newbold is presently a partner in the Torch Hill Investment Partners and is a managing partner as of January of 2005. You can imagine to become a lieutenant general, he also has an exceptionally distinguished record of service and command at very, very many levels of the Marine Corps, including commanding general of the 1st Marine Division. In his last position, of course, he served as Director of Operations of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Snider.
Thank you, Bob. It's a delight to be back with Foreign Policy Research Institute. It's my first time participating with the Reserve Officers Association, but I appreciate the opportunity not only to discuss a subject that I think is vital, but to also spend the day with some colleagues that I haven't seen for a while. This is a remarkable collection, and the organizers of the conference are to be complimented on the group of people that they have gotten to take some time to talk about this. My topic is a little bit different. This panel is the fourth panel of the day. We've worked our way down to a single issue as opposed to a broad set of issues. My qualifications to speak about this topic do not come from my military service. I left the military profession about 1990 when I was moved from the active roles to the retired roles. It took me a year to certify in a new profession. And ever since then, I've been studying professions, military professions. So I want to spend about the first 10 minutes of my talk putting us all on one framework about how to think about modern competitive military professions. I say this because when I teach, lecture, write, there is an immense amount of misinformation about professions and misunderstanding. You'll notice one word that I no longer use in my vocabulary is the word professionalism. I recommend that for all of you. There is the noun profession, and we can talk about that in a characterological way, and there are individuals called professionals, and we can talk about them. But professionalism is in the mind of the beholder, and in those conversations we speak right by each other all the time, without ever getting to the specifics that will allow us to be either developmental or policy relevant. So I want to talk a little bit about professions. I want to do that in the context of civil-military relations. And the first chart that you're looking at shows the 4 relationships in civil-military relations. And in fact, there is a relationship in there between relationship A of civilian leaders to military leaders, and that's what we spent the last panel talking about. How corrosive has the Iraq War been on that relationship at the nexus? But the nexus, the issue of civilian control, as some people call it, is not the totality of civil-military relations. There's at least 4 sets of relations there, only one of which is military to military. And I'm as vitally interested in the military to military one as I am any in civil-military relations, although I research and teach there also. I'm interested in what is in the large orange circle. How do we think about military professions and their role in this society, where obviously they're a subset of the society, and the elites of the military interact with the elites of the society. And that is the civil-military nexus. That's the military and media. That's any number of things that we could talk about, but I want to reduce your focus to the orange circle. And here's what the orange circle looks like. Professions are defined by their expert knowledge. Let me say that again. The currency of a profession is its expert knowledge. What is the boundary around it? What's the content of it? What are the subdivisions of it? How do you know it's expert? I would submit that under that definition there are at least 3 military professions in America, and I have written that there is an emerging 4th military profession. There is an Army profession of land combat, there is a maritime profession, an aerospace profession, and there is an emerging joint profession around the expert knowledge of how do you conduct joint warfare in a particular strategic command and control and intelligence architecture. And that expert knowledge is not the expert knowledge of the services. It is a different expert knowledge, and it's now documented that that knowledge is beginning to create its own. Well, if it is, where do the professionals come from for that profession? And we've already identified one significant disconnect in future American civil-military relations. The dotted line is also important. Professions certify their professionals. It took me a year before the academic board at West Point would certify me as a professor. I mean, they were really nit about it. They checked every little thing. What had I done? Where had I published? How much had I taught? Why should I be a professor? That's what professions do. It's called certification. How are the military professions certifying their professionals today? How does every soldier's mother and father know that the captain commanding the company is certified to lead Americans in combat? How do we do that in the military? I would submit that if you're promoting 98% of the captains to major, the promotion system is not a certification. So then what is the certification? How do we know a colonel is competent to command a brigade in combat? These are issues for military professions to resolve for themselves. But I only point out to you that there are a lot of people involved with the military, and a lot of military voices. There are only few voices that are truly professional. Those people who still are practicing the profession. Now, what do we produce? I study the Army profession. Incidentally, the naval profession and the aerospace profession have not been studied in the last 40 years to my knowledge. When I initiated study with funds from private foundations to study the Army profession, it had not been studied in 30 years. 1970 was the last official study. We initiated a study in 1998, published the first book in 2002, published the second book in 2005. We've now reinitiated the study of Army as profession. But that's about all we've done. It's an immensely difficult process. How to think about professions. There's 3 ways you can organize any productive activity in a society. I'm speaking of ideal types now. Much as Huntington spoke of ideal types, as sociologists speak of ideal types. You can organize productive work under a business, set of market forces, a bureaucracy, or a profession. Every society gets to choose how its work is to be done. Remember, the society chooses if you are a profession, not the profession. If anybody thinks the American society doesn't know a difference when it looks at the military between a profession and a non-profession, just look what happened to the Army after Aberdeen Proving Ground. Behave like a bureaucracy, we'll treat you like a bureaucracy. And the Army got the back of the hand from the American society, and they were told how to do basic training in congressional statute. Their autonomy was stripped from them, one of the biggest identities of a profession. Expert knowledge, autonomy to practice. Or you can have this third way, what I'm talking about, professions. One of these 3 logics. The difficult